The PS2 era delivered some of the greatest games ever made, with unforgettable adventures, innovative gameplay, and stories that still hold up today. Many of these classics remain just as fun and influential years later. Here are PS2 games that are still worth playing today. Guilty Gear X2 was very different from the usual fighting games I played on the PS2. The roster instantly stood out because almost every character looked strange in a fun way, whether it was a doctor carrying a giant scalpel or fighters attacking with yo-yos, guitars, and ghosts. After spending more time with it, I started noticing how much depth the combat system had. Roman cancels, burst attacks, and fast combo chains made every match feel active because the game rewards aggressive play instead of waiting around. The heavy rock soundtrack and anime presentation also gave the game a style that still feels unique today. Even after all these years, I still think this game is worth coming back to. Kingdom Hearts 2 immediately made me notice how much smoother and faster everything became compared to the first game. Traveling through the Disney worlds with Sora, Donald, and Goofy still had that fun crossover charm, but the combat became the biggest reason I kept playing. The reaction commands during fights made boss battles look flashy while still being easy to understand, and the movement during combat flowed much better this time. I also liked how every world had its own music, atmosphere, and story moments that kept the adventure from feeling repetitive. Even today, the mix of action combat, Disney nostalgia, and emotional scenes makes this a game I still enjoy going back to. God of War 2 made me feel powerful almost the entire time, because the combat rarely slowed down and every fight looked brutal in the best way possible. Using the blades of Athena to launch enemies into the air, chain long combos, and finish monsters with violent animations still looks satisfying today. I also liked how the game mixed huge battles with puzzle sections and massive environments inspired by Greek mythology. Climbing giant titans, fighting across massive temples, and facing giant creatures constantly made the adventure feel larger with every new area. Kratos himself also gave the game a different tone compared to other action games because he cared more about revenge than being a hero. Even today, this still feels like an action game worth revisiting. Ōkami gave me a very different type of adventure compared to most action games I played around that time. Playing as the wolf goddess Amaterasu already felt unusual, and the brush mechanic made exploration and puzzle solving much more fun than I expected. Drawing symbols to restore nature, attack enemies, or interact with the world gave the gameplay a creative flow that stayed interesting for a long time. I also liked watching cursed areas slowly return to life after helping people and bringing nature back to the world. The story balanced emotional moments, humor, and Japanese mythology without becoming hard to follow. Years later, this is still a game I enjoy revisiting because of how unique the whole experience feels. Burnout 3 Takedown felt very different from most racing games because winning was not only about speed, it was also about destroying rival drivers during the race. The takedown system made every event chaotic in the best way since smashing opponents into traffic or walls never stopped being satisfying. I also liked how aggressive driving constantly rewarded me with boost, which kept the races feeling insanely fast from start to finish. Crash Junction mode became another reason I kept returning because creating giant pileups and watching explosions happen everywhere was strangely addictive. The sense of speed, loud soundtrack, and non-stop action still make this game exciting whenever I decide to replay it today. Sly 2 Band of Thieves made every mission feel like part of a larger heist instead of random levels connected together. I liked how Bentley planned each operation, while Sly and Murray handled the dangerous work step by step. Sneaking across rooftops, pickpocketing guards, climbing giant buildings, and escaping after robberies made the adventure stay active almost the entire time. The game also changed things up often with hacking sections, turret missions, and brawler moments with Murray, so the gameplay rarely became repetitive. I also enjoyed how much personality the main trio had during conversations because it made the story more entertaining to follow. Playing this game again today still feels surprisingly fresh and fun. Beyond Good and Evil had a lot more variety than I expected once the adventure started opening up. One moment I was sneaking through restricted areas and taking photos of secret evidence, and the next I was racing through water sections or exploring the city for upgrades and hidden items. Jade also felt more grounded compared to many action game protagonists from that era, which made the story easier to connect with. I especially liked how the game slowly revealed the truth behind the military forces protecting the planet, since it gave the adventure a more serious tone without becoming overly complicated. The stealth, exploration, music, and world design still make this game memorable whenever I replay it today. Red Faction became memorable to me because it let me destroy parts of the environment in ways that almost no shooters were doing at the time. Blasting holes through walls, creating shortcuts, and finding hidden rooms with explosives made the missions feel much more interactive than I expected. I also liked how the game constantly changed locations, moving from mining tunnels to laboratories, submarines, and large outdoor areas without making the campaign feel repetitive. The weapons were another big reason I enjoyed it, especially the railgun, since shooting enemies directly through walls never stopped being satisfying. Even now, the fast action and destructive gameplay still make this game easy to go back and enjoy again. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater became much more interesting to me once I realized how many different ways the game allowed me to approach situations. I could sneak through the jungle slowly using camouflage and silencers, or create complete chaos with explosions and heavy weapons if things went wrong. The survival mechanics also made the adventure feel different compared to other stealth games, since hunting animals, healing injuries, and changing camouflage all became part of staying alive. I also enjoyed how memorable the boss fights were, especially against the End and the Fury, because every encounter felt unique. The Cold War setting, jungle atmosphere, and excellent soundtrack still make this a stealth game I enjoy replaying years later. Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution took me much longer to understand compared to most fighting games, but that became the reason I enjoyed it so much. Instead of relying on flashy combos or crazy special attacks, every fight focused more on timing, positioning, and reading the opponent correctly. I liked how each character used real fighting styles, because the animations and movement looked believable during matches. The game also rewarded patience, since rushing in carelessly usually ended badly against skilled opponents. Learning even a single character properly took a lot of time, but winning after finally understanding the mechanics felt extremely satisfying. The simple presentation, deep combat system, and strong gameplay balance still make this fighting game easy to respect today. Silent Hill 2 stayed in my mind because the horror came more from the atmosphere and psychological tension than the combat itself. Walking through foggy streets, hearing strange noises in empty hallways, and opening doors without knowing what was waiting behind them made almost every area feel stressful. I also liked how the game constantly played with my nerves by making simple sounds feel threatening even when nothing was there. James Sunderland's story added even more weight to the experience because the town slowly revealed parts of his guilt and memories in disturbing ways. Pyramid Head also became one of the most unsettling enemies I had seen in a horror game. Years later, the atmosphere and psychological horror still make this game hard to forget. Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance became really enjoyable to me because it was easy to jump into and immediately start fighting through hordes of enemies for better gear and upgrades. I liked exploring the dungeons, caves, and crypts because the game constantly rewarded me with new weapons, spells, and loot after battles. The combat was simple, but chaining attacks together while cutting through monsters still felt satisfying throughout most of the adventure. I also thought the environments looked surprisingly detailed, especially the lighting, water effects, and darker fantasy atmosphere during certain levels. While the gameplay loop stayed repetitive at times, the fast action and dungeon crawling style still make this game fun to revisit after all these years. Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal became one of the most entertaining games in the series to me because it constantly added new ideas without slowing the adventure down. The shooting felt faster this time, and leveling up weapons made every battle more satisfying as the guns became stronger and more chaotic. I also liked how the game kept changing the pacing with arena battles, Galactic Ranger missions, Clank sections, and even the funny Captain Quark side-scrolling levels. The humor still worked really well too, especially during the cutscenes and character interactions. Exploring different planets, collecting upgrades, and trying out ridiculous weapons made the whole adventure hard to stop playing once it got going. Prince of Persia. The Sands of Time became memorable to me because movement through the world felt smooth in a way that very few platforming games managed back then. Running across walls, swinging from poles, and chaining jumps together made every puzzle section feel exciting without becoming frustrating most of the time. I also liked how the time powers changed both the platforming and combat, especially being able to rewind mistakes after missing a jump or taking a bad hit during fights. The palace environments, traps, and puzzle design constantly pushed me forward because I always wanted to see what was waiting in the next area. The mix of platforming, action, and time mechanics still makes this adventure easy to revisit today. Ico stayed with me because it created such a lonely and emotional atmosphere with very little dialogue. Exploring the giant castle alongside Yorda made the whole adventure feel more personal, since protecting her became just as important as solving the puzzles. I also liked how the game trusted me to figure things out on my own instead of constantly explaining every objective. Climbing across huge structures, moving boxes, pulling levers, and finding new paths through the castle made the puzzles feel rewarding without becoming overly complicated. The soft music, quiet moments, and simple presentation also helped the world feel mysterious the entire time. Years later, this still feels like one of the most artistic adventures released during that generation. Resident Evil 4 changed how survival horror felt to me because the game focused less on helplessness and more on surviving overwhelming situations with smart weapon use. Fighting through villages packed with aggressive enemies carrying chainsaws, axes, and dynamite made almost every encounter feel intense. I also liked how satisfying the combat became once I started upgrading weapons and learning enemy weak points. Landing headshots, knocking enemies down with kicks, and using shotguns to blast groups apart never stopped being fun. The pacing also stayed strong because the game constantly introduced new locations, enemy types, and set pieces before anything could become repetitive. The action, atmosphere, and combat design still make this one of the easiest horror games to replay today. Final Fantasy X quickly made me care about its world because every main character had their own personality, struggles, and reasons for joining the journey. I especially liked how Yuna's pilgrimage gave the story a constant sense of purpose while the world of Spira slowly revealed its deeper problems and traditions. The turn-based combat also stayed fun for a long time because swapping party members during battles made every character useful instead of leaving some forgotten on the sidelines. I also spent a lot of time experimenting with the sphere grid and customizing weapons since it added more freedom to character progression. The emotional story, soundtrack, and beautiful locations still make this one of the most memorable RPG adventures from that era. Tekken 5 reminded me why the series became so popular in the first place because the combat felt fast, smooth, and satisfying almost immediately. Pulling off combos, juggling opponents, and switching between different fighters always felt responsive, which made every match more enjoyable, whether I was playing casually or trying harder characters. I also liked how large the roster was since every fighter had a different style and rhythm during battles. The stages looked much better this time too, especially with the environmental effects like breakable floors, fire, and moving objects reacting during fights. Add in the strong soundtrack and all the extra content, and this still feels like one of the most replayable fighting games from that generation. NBA Street Volume 2 made basketball much more exciting to me because the game focused on style, tricks, and non-stop energy instead of trying to be realistic. Pulling off crazy passes, wall moves, and massive dunks while building the game breaker meter made every match feel chaotic in the best way possible. I also liked how rewarding the combo system became once I learned how to chain moves together without losing possession. The quartz, soundtrack, commentary, and exaggerated animations gave the game a ton of personality from start to finish. Unlocking legendary players and customizing teams also gave me more reasons to keep playing long after the first few matches. This still feels like one of the most entertaining arcade sports games from that generation. Jak II felt much darker and more intense compared to the first game, and that change honestly caught me off guard at the beginning. Haven City had a completely different atmosphere, with hover vehicles, armed guards, and mission-based progression that clearly took inspiration from open-world crime games. I also liked how much more aggressive the gameplay became once guns were introduced, because combat started feeling faster and more chaotic during later missions. The game could also become brutally difficult at times, especially during escort missions and long chase sequences, but finally beating those sections felt rewarding because the challenge stayed consistent throughout the adventure. The darker story, larger world, and harder gameplay still make this sequel very memorable to revisit today.